We call it Going Dark, where they close the building for a period of time, and would encourage all of you to go worship that Redeemer. And that's usually for anywhere from 2 to 6 months. The idea in that is so that you would understand the culture of Redeemer Church, that you would get to meet a lot more people at Redeemer Church, that you would see how they do things, that you would see what their values are, and so that you could share values back and forth. So that's Going Dark. Bay City did go dark for about 2.5 months. During that time, all the people worshiped at the West Campus. The pews were very old and not in very good shape, so they pulled out all the pews. They put in all new carpeting, all new pews, all new paint in the building. They put in, they did a lot of other, throughout the whole building. They remodeled it, repainted it. So they put in a new air conditioning system. So during that 2.5 months, they renovated that East Campus. And during that time, all the folks worshiped together at the West Campus. And then they had a grand opening celebration where everybody came back, and in fact they closed the West Campus, and everybody came to the East Campus that week to celebrate this grand opening. And then people started going to whatever campus they wanted to go to after that. That's Going Dark, and that was only for 2.5 months. Potterville, on the other hand, Sycamore Creek, they did not ever go dark. They have just gradually transitioned things along. They've done a major, redone the whole entryway. It's really nice, and the way they've got it working now, they've done a lot of it. They've opened up a great big fellowship area like you all have. They did not have that. They just had a narrow little hallway before. So they opened that up. But they've not ever closed and stopped worshiping there. They continued to worship around all the construction that's been going on. So that'll be a question that Redeemer and that Rod and the leadership team there will need to answer. Whether and it's a question that you're going to have to ask too, is whether it's going to go dark or not. And so you can know the best way to go about that. And then what's the staffing going to be like and making all those decisions. The next step for the adoption is finalizing that. There's a merger document that will be written. You will become one congregation in 2 sites. We've talked about voting already. There will be joint leadership. There's going to be a joint banking account. I can almost guarantee that there will be some new name for this church, but what that will be, we've not even had that conversation yet. And then the bonding, taking on the family values, so that you're part of the Redeemer family. That's a big part of it. There's the legal part of it. Legally, you'll become one. The Redeemer's going to have an attorney that they will hire that will take your incorporation and bring them in through that merger adoption process. You will be dissolving the legal denominational entity. So you have most people don't know this, but you have we call it a GCFA number. It's a General Finance and Administration number. It's the number that the denomination knows your church by. So that number will cease to exist on the day that the merger happens, and you'll be given a new number that will also be linked to Redeemer's number. And denominationally, you won't be known as St. John's First United Methodist Church any longer. And then there's caring for all your historical records. Those records are someplace and are gathered, and we'll need to make sure that those are cared for in the right way. and that those records are put as part of the conference archives. And then another big part of it is the grief and the movement forward of becoming one church. There's going to be grief. How many of you have been a part of this church since your birth or early childhood? A number of you. And the building isn't going to change, but the ownership of the building is going to change. And so, you know, there's some grief involved with that. There's some grief involved in knowing that before and currently your SPR or PPR makes the decisions about pastors, about whether you want a new pastor to come, whether you want your pastor to go. You've been able to, there's that independence part of it, that you've been able to make those decisions yourself. And going forward, you won't be able to make that decision. It'll be the SPR of Redeemer Church, of which some of you will be on that in the future. So, but there's some grief involved with all of that, and we need to acknowledge that, and Redeemer Church needs to acknowledge it. On the video, one of the campus pastors talks about, and he has shared with me the great amount of time that he spent grief counseling with folks in that campus. So that's an area that Rod and his staff are going to have to be aware of as well. So let's stop there. And are there questions that you have? I'm sure there are. Yes.
In the case of Bay City, how far apart were these two campuses geographically?
I'm guessing they're about 8 miles apart. The West Campus is not very far off the highway, off of 75, and the East Campus is much more downtown. Part of the West Campus's motive for wanting to adopt that was that if they hadn't, it was imminent that the East Campus was going to be closing within the next 1 or 2 years. And that would have left a huge part of the city of Bay City without a United Methodist Church. And it would have left only one United Methodist Church in the whole city, and that's kind of on the outskirts of town. So they felt it was very important to have another presence in the city. So, yes, and then I'll come over to you.
Have there been, in other cases, we're very blessed here at our church, we have an endowment fund. What kind of, has that been the case at other churches? What kind of say would there be? How has that been handled? How would that be handled?
Yeah, very good question. Yeah, several of the other churches have had endowments. The Wyoming campus, the Cornerstone adopted, is now South Wyoming campus. They had a very large endowment because I think it was they had an older building, and CVS wanted that property because it was a great corner lot and paid them mega millions to buy that lot, help build them the new church, and they still had a huge endowment of money left over. And others have had endowments as well. The endowments, all the assets, as well as all the liabilities, become part of the larger church. So Redeemer will take over ownership of the endowments, but also any liabilities. If you had any loans or anything like that, they would take those on as well. Restrictions that are on those endowments, the restrictions follow the endowments. So if it's only to be used for buying a new refrigerator, then that's all they can use it for in the future. Okay? Yeah. Yeah, good question. Yes?
I'd like to comment on that too. Amy, I talked with Rod real briefly on the endowment because a lot of people here asked me to.
Right.
And what he said is that their endowment would operate similar to ours. It's all going to be one fund, but they would use those funds as we do. A portion, like if this church needed a new roof, or well, half the endowment fund would help and then half. So
Very
that was, yeah. But the
Great, thank
question
you,
that I
thank you
had-
for clarifying that, that's good.
Chairman of the endowment committee.
Okay.
The question that I have is, as we begin putting this document together on what's going to happen, now, how is that typically handled? Like groups, 3 or 4 people from our church and the Redeemer Church sitting together across the table? Is there a moderator or somebody helping bring us together?
Yeah, that's a great question. In an adoption, for the most part, it's Redeemer that puts that together, probably in consultation with some folks from this church. But they're mostly responsible for it and responsible for the content. I'll say it in a pretty blunt way. They're going to call the shots. So they'll be putting the document together. Most likely they'll include some of your folks to run it by and get ideas from. But then you'll also have plenty of time to see that and study that ahead of voting on it. In other kinds of mergers, there's much more, there's not a paternal aspect of it. There's much more of equals. And so all the churches involved. I work a lot with what we call vital mergers, and that's where 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 churches come together. They all sell off all their property and come together as in one new facility. And so they all have equal say in what happens moving forward. In an adoption, it's mostly Redeemer that has the say. They're taking on you. So, but as a loving parent, takes on an adopted child as well.
And my thing is we have a chance to communicate,
Yes.
to interact. Or,
Yeah. Yes, you will. Yeah. Yes.
Now, what is the current pastoral situation? Will they be adding a pastor at all? I want to be sure, as we start a new life cycle, that's exciting too, but I want to make sure that we don't leave anybody behind either.
Sure. So right now, Redeemer, I'm not sure what their total number of staff people are, but as far as appointed clergy, Rod Calajanan, the lead pastor that's been there for 20-some years, Rod's staying, and they brought on an associate pastor this last year, Tim Trometer. This is Tim's second appointment, and Tim, in our early conversations, Tim would be allocated most of his time to be here as the campus pastor for this congregation. For this
Just
campus.
if you're curious, he is related to the Trometers here in this area.
Oh, he is?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Ellen?
Well, when Rod made clear that he expected he would come and preach here a lot, often, maybe more in the beginning, it wouldn't just be Tim, like, they would share too, so.
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
that's my understanding too, that
Yeah.
it's gonna be Rod initially, and
Okay.
then to integrate Tim just a little bit too, but it will be a shared position.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good.
Okay,
Good.
thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
Would our pastor's residence then become property of what Redeemer and of course, and then possibly could be used for that purpose as well? Some staffing from what Redeemer.
Yes. All of the property all becomes, so your parsonage all becomes part of Redeemer Church. But Ellen wants to answer part of that, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
we know that Tim's not gonna move into the parsonage, and right now there's no, other staff member that's interested, so it may be, it's sort of up in the air, I guess, to say, but it may be that we sell that parsonage, which doesn't meet conference parsonage standards anyway, or it may be that we rent it out with the idea that in the future there might be somebody that want it, but that hasn't been decided, but it would obviously become part of the Redeemer package, and, and we should know by the time we go down it, what their decision is.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Would we only have like one the secretary or, and then one bulletin between us? Or how would that work? I mean, do we still have a bulletin and they have, not a bulletin, but like a tower chimes?
That's a great question, and I don't know that we've thought through those particulars yet. I don't know that Rod and his staff have thought through those yet. Some of the adoptions, each campus has their own bulletin with their own announcements. Although I would say that always you would have announcements from Redeemer Church, because there'll be some things that as a combined church that only Redeemer would do, and some that only you would do. So those are advertised both places. Whether there'll be a separate bulletin or all joined together in one common bulletin, that I'm not sure, and I don't think that they've even thought that far yet. So, yes.
What about the secretary in this church?
Again, that the secretary becomes an employee of Redeemer Church, and what they decide to do, that would be up in the air. I will. Do you have any insight on that, or?
I don't.
Okay.
We discussed when we met what staff was here, but there wasn't made any mention as to any changes
Yeah.
at this time.
One initial comment made in our first meeting with Rod was that most of that activity would be taken care of by the Redeemer, but we would still have some position in this church.
Right.
Not sure part-time or what that would be,
Okay.
but there would still be somebody here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Reese is upstairs, she knows the one answer.
Okay.
I had lunch with Diane, business manager from DeWitt, last week, and we were talking over some of the finance issues, and it's all going to be kind of a in progress thing, but I don't think we'll have any problem working together.
Yeah.
And
Good.
more likely, down the road, if the church grows like we're anticipating, we may add more staff at this site. So we'll just wait and see what happens.
Yeah.
Could
Good.
you repeat that? I couldn't hear it.
You can hear?
Oh, okay.
I met with Diane last week, she's the business manager in DeWitt, and we had lunch and discussed a few things. We discussed the finances, membership. We didn't go into bulletins or newsletters, but we did touch on websites, and it's all going to have to be decided as we go along. But I think we'll be able to work together very well. And the decision, the discussion we had, it's all going to be up to Ron and the ministry staff too, was that for the time being, not much is going to change here as far as the office. And down the road, if we grow like we hope to, we may add more staff.
Yeah, I didn't want to talk too much out of school on how much Rod had talked to me, but his initial conversation was that they're a little understaffed at Redeemer right now, and would look forward to adding that additional staff that you have here.
I
So,
don't see any of the Redeemer staff coming here.
Right.
I think that's my impression.
okay.
They're all pretty busy there, that if the need here to add staff, they would add new or increase whatever.
Yes.
So Don mentioned in their first meeting with Rod, I'm just curious who and how this all got started. Who was involved in the process of saying, yes, adoption sounds like a good direction for us to look into?
I have my ideas, but I'll let Ellen answer that.
I'm going to let Fred answer.
Okay, Fred's going to answer. We'll pass it on.
It started back at the last church conference when we were anticipating Ellen being here for a while. And then shortly after a conference and we got everything voted in, Ellen announced her retirement to the district. And we suddenly were faced in a very short period of time with a dilemma. The dilemma was the district and conference wanted to know what direction we were going to take as a church appointment cycle. So look, we've got people, we need to know where we're gonna put people, we need to know if it's gonna be there or not. What do you say about this? And they were talking directly to the superintendent at that time was talking directly to me. I'm going into cabinet, what do you say? I said, I cannot make that decision. It was involving money, it was involving personnel. I said, I can't do that. They had in mind already that they were going to put somebody in the church here at that time, November, early December. And so, as I talked to Ellen and talked to our finance people and our church council, it's like, here's what the district is sort of looking for. And we honestly felt there's no way we could financially afford to do that without asking for a strong commitment from the congregation. And Ellen, we talked about this, Ellen has been doing things with her insurance and other finances that honestly she's been given a lot. The thought was, we're not going to get a new pastor in anywhere close to what she's been given, not only that would take. It was about, as we talked about, it was about $20,000 difference in healthcare, salaries, and things like that. And the way we felt at the time was that is a lot of money for this congregation. So we started talking about other options. We, again, district, pastor, staff parish, and the church council. And it came down to, look, we can either go with a local pastor, perhaps, and get somebody new to start it out. We didn't feel like that option was a good choice for this congregation. Another one was to go to a two-point charge type conference. We looked at churches that might match up with us and have a shared pastor. That didn't seem to be a good option. And so then the thought came up, well, would you ever consider this? This being either a merger or adoption. And, well, okay, tell us more about that. And that came from the district superintendent. There was an urgency because of churches, Methodist churches closing. They had additional pastors that needed to be moved someplace. They were saying, we've got somebody in mind, and we're going into cabinet. What do you say? And I said, I'm not saying. If you want to say, where did it start? It started on that one. I'm not going to commit this congregation to what we believed was pretty expensive option for where we were as a congregation.
Great, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I would like to follow it up with one statement. I would hope in the future, it sounds like everyone in the congregation gets a vote.
No.
But I would hope that if there was actual open communication, that it be announced. I am part of the staff parish. I never knew of those meetings. I never knew until the announcement in church. And so I want to feel like we're being informed, and it's not being a pick and choose who you want in on that discussion. And that's the way I feel it happened.
Okay. And I will just say that this whole idea has come up very recently and moving very fast. From the time I was informed about it, it's been moving very fast. And
Can I say something?
sure.
I don't feel qualified to say kind of what the thought has been at Redeemer. That's not my position. But as a member of Redeemer, and to kind of address your thoughts, not knowing what it was going to be, Redeemer has been preparing for something for a really long time. And we've been praying about it. We felt there was going to be something that was going to be offered, and we wanted to be ready. We did a huge event this last year with, kicking out our mortgage, and, the congregation came together, and it was all with the thought of something's coming, and we want to be prepared, and we want to be ready. There have been other offers with taking on some other churches. They weren't good fits. And then this came up, and it came up really quickly. I think and it was an emergency meeting with the boards. It was really just like a couple weeks ago. And so since then, we kind of broke off to our different areas. We want to have as much information as we can as a church and being on that decision end of it. I came up here, sat in the back, and kind of checked out the church to get a feel for things. We did, demographics surveys of the community and the county, what, the ages are, a lot of different things. Diane, we met with the office group here, what was coming for this church, what anticipated costs were, all those different things. We want to look at every single thing and see if we're a good fit to what we have to offer. And I think it's kind of like kind of like a transfusion. I mean, the body stays the same. It's just what can we add? What experience do we have that can just be added in? It's not to come in and step on anybody's toes or radical change or type of thing. It's how can we all with one purpose come together and make it better. But there's a lot of thought that's going into it, a lot of information gathered. So, and it did come up very quickly. So.
Great. Thank you. Yes.
Can I just add one more?
Okay.
I apologize if I left you all. I'm going to check. I thought we made announcements that the staff there shouldn't be meeting, the council would be meeting, things like that. I think as we move forward, that would be a perfect example of why it's so critical for communications to be open and have those dialogues and making sure everybody gets notice. Because when you think sometimes that, well, yeah, everybody knows about that. We're talking about that. I mean, and then you miss somebody. And if that happens, I'd like to apologize to you personally.
Great. Thank you.
And as we move forward, those are some of the roadblocks that we're going to encounter, I'm sure.
Yes.
I'll say one of the other things, we were very concerned because a lot of our, I would say, I call them pillars of the church, were out of town. They were down south for the winter. We had 5 or 6 things. It's like, how do you communicate with them what's going on?
Right.
How do you get input from them before this happens? And we made a decision that it would be after a certain point that we would make the announcement. And we took some heat from honestly, from the district and the superintendent about that too. Said, what do you mean? The congregation should have known this when Ellen submitted her retirement. It's public information now. And that was a decision that was done away.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Do you have?
Maybe Fred kind of covered some of where I was going to go, but one word that Fred did not use, that we did use a fair amount, was hospice care. And that's really where a lot of us felt that our church was heading. We could stay open, We could have a young, new person in the church, but unless we start to do something different in this church, we were on a downward slide. Our attendance has not grown, and our income hasn't. And taking two churches together, neither of whom are growing and doing things differently, might not seem to answer that. And this was, many of us thought, our chance to revive this church and to bring new enthusiasm. And just like many of us are on 3 or 4 committees, and you get pretty burnt out having to do everything in this church. We don't have enough people to man all the committees, to do all the things. And to have these other resources to help us, we felt that's reversing the hospice care.
Great, yes, yeah, good. Somebody, yes.
Not everybody that worships here would have a vote, only those that would have membership.
Exactly, yes.
Like, for instance, I don't have membership in the church here because I'm a clergy member of another conference.
Okay.
And so I could not vote.
Right, yeah, yeah, you're correct. Although, I think, need to check the discipline. I think as a clergy.
It's another denomination.
Oh, another denomination, okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, just members of the church have the vote at the church conference, yes. Okay, we've gone about an hour. I want to answer your questions, and I can stay here as long as you want, but we're seeing some people get restless and go ahead and leave. They've got other places to go. Any other burning questions that you want to make sure get answered? Okay, oh yes.
Would this happen by the time past Eloise?
Our plan right now is that, yes, it would happen, that the adoption would take place July 1st, there's 2 town hall meetings, listening sessions that will happen over the next, I think she said, last of April, 1st of May, and then a vote sometime in May.